And Chair Davis, we are live and ready to go at the 8:30 mark.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the MTD Board of Directors meeting this morning. I'm going to start with the roll call of the board members. Director Perotti.
Here.
Director McQuarrie.
Here.
Director Weinberg is absent. Director Rodriguez.
Here.
Director Sheeler.
Here.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Here.
Chair Davis is present, obviously. Madam Clerk, Christina, could I have the report regarding the posting of the agenda, please?
Of course. Allow me just one moment.
No problem.
Apologize. Okay, the agenda was posted on Friday, October 13th, 2020 at MTD's administrative office, mailed and emailed to those on the agenda list, and posted on MTD's website.
Good, thank you very much. That takes us to the consent calendar this morning. We have two items. Item 4 is the approval of the prior minutes for the meeting of November 3rd, 2020. And item 5, the cash report for the period October 24th, 2020 through November 6th, 2020. Are there any questions on either of those two items? Not seeing any questions. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion to
Chair, I
approve.
move to approve the consent calendar.
Okay, I'll recognize Mr. Tabor, and I will second by Director Rodriguez. We will do a roll call vote on that. Director Perotti,
Aye.
Director McQuarrie, I'm not seeing Director McQuarrie. I'll come back. Director Weinberg is absent. Director Rodriguez,
Aye.
Director Sheeler,
Yes.
Director McQuarrie,
I'm going to abstain from the minutes, but I approve the consent calendar.
okay, so noted. And Vice Chair Tabor?
Yes.
And Chair Davis votes yes on both items. So the consent calendar is approved. Thank you very much. Concluding the consent calendar takes us to item 6 on our agenda. This is public comment for items which are not on our current agenda today. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone who wishes to speak under public comment?
There are no public comments at this time.
Good, thank you very much. Moving right along, item 7 This is the fiscal year 2019 and 20 audit financial statements and reports. Manager Estrada.
Good morning, Chair Davis, members of the board. I'm going to hand this item off to Mr. Davis, our Director of Finance and Administration, to introduce our auditor and provide you an update, or essentially the results of the annual single audit. Mr.
Okay.
Davis, all yours.
Okay. And for the record, note that Mr. Davis is Mr. Brad Davis. There are two of us, that's why.
Yep.
Brad, good morning. You're muted. There you go. There you go. Good morning, Brad.
Good morning. Good morning to you and the rest of the board. It's been a while, so it's good to see you all. I guess really what I'm going to do for the most part is turn this over to Ryan Nielsen. He's the partner with Brown Armstrong, our auditing firm, and he's in charge of our particular audit. And I guess before I did get underway, I just wanted to thank him and his team for the work they do. It's a lot of effort for them as well as our side, and there's a lot of collaboration going on back and forth throughout the process. So I just wanted to give thanks to Ryan and his team. And as this agenda item is mainly it's a report from the auditor to the board of directors, I think I just want to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Nielsen at this time.
Good morning, Mr. Nielsen. How are you?
Hey, good morning. And thank you, Brad, for the introduction. Again, my name's Ryan Nielsen. I'm the engagement partner from the accounting firm Brown Armstrong over in Bakersfield. It's my pleasure to present to you the results of our audit of your financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2020. As you know, each year the district prepares a set of financial reports whereby you represent or assert to the users of the information contained therein that the information is accurate, complete, and fairly presented in accordance with GAAP or generally accepted accounting principles. It's our responsibility as independent auditors to perform an engagement in accordance with our professional standards and to render an opinion as to whether or not your assertions and representations are in fact accurate. So with that in mind, I'll give you a brief overview of the process. It begins early in the year with the establishment and coordination of a timeline with the district's management, or financial management in particular, to ensure that the audit commences and is completed on a timely basis. In order to continue that process, we have regular correspondence throughout the engagement period, the purpose of which is to update everyone as to the status of the audit, ask for the questions, and bring to light any potential issues in an attempt, at least, to have a very efficient process. This year, everybody is aware, was slightly different. Typically, we spend a week on site during what we call our interim audit period, and that's time dedicated to evaluating your internal controls, your checks and balances, if you will, and determine if there's been any significant changes and assess whether or not those controls remain properly designed and are operating effectively. Again, that process was a bit different this year because we were not on site, but we were able to accomplish the same goal as far as updating. Thankfully, this wasn't our first year completing the audit, so we had previously performed walkthroughs of all the processes and procedures in prior 2 years. At the close of the fiscal year, we typically perform an observation of the inventory taken of spare parts and supplies, and then subsequent to the close of the fiscal year end is when we plan our final field work, and that's the portion of the audit dedicated to substantiating the financial statement line items and disclosures, which ultimately are presented to the users in the form of your financial statements. Wherever possible during that process, we attempt to confirm account balances with third parties. So we go outside to your banks and financial institutions to confirm cash accounts, as an example, and also seek representations from legal counsel as to whether there are any undisclosed commitments or contingencies that might be of importance to the users or required to be presented in the financial statements. And an audit is designed to provide reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance. So we take what's known as a risk-based approach, and take a look at all the information gathered through our interim field work and assessment of internal controls, and look for areas that might create a higher risk of material misstatements to the financial statements. And then we focus our attention on those areas. And that's typically where we have significant estimates or implementation of new accounting standards or complex accounting standards. And then look at grant agreements, expenditures of grant funds, state reporting requirements, salaries and benefits, and expenditures for capital assets. So that's not an all-inclusive list, but gives you an overview of the majority of the significant audit areas. So that brief overview of the process brings us to where we are today, which is presentation of our reports to you. The audit reports are the primary purpose of our audit engagement, which is the rendering of our opinion. And I'm happy to report, with the exception of the district did not perform a physical inventory account at year end at June 30th, 2020, due to health concerns related to COVID-19. Our professional standards essentially require us to observe the physical count of inventories in order for us to become comfortable with the financial statement, the actual dollar amount of those balances, and determine whether or not the quantities and any potential adjustments are recorded. Because because the district wasn't able to perform the inventory count, we can't give an opinion on inventory itself. But other than that, there is no issues whatsoever in the financial statements, and it's our opinion that the district's financial statements present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position as of June 30th, 2020, and the changes in the financial position, cash flows, et cetera, in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. In addition to our opinion on the financial statements, we issue an opinion on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with governmental auditing standards. That's what's known as a yellow book audit or a single audit. So separately, we take a look at all of the material grants that are provided or passed through the federal government, and issued an unmodified opinion on the single audit report. Again, there was we have to issue a finding because the lack of performance of an inventory count is considered a weakness in internal controls. We fully understand the reasoning behind it and don't dispute that. Just because it doesn't fall, there's no other way for us to get around it within our professional standards. A finding has to be issued that effectively states that the district didn't perform a physical inventory count. But we were informed of that ahead of time and knew that up front and did not disagree with that decision. At the conclusion of each engagement period, we're required to communicate general items related to the overall audit, which includes our responsibilities, those of management. If we had any difficulties encountered in performing the audit, if we had material corrected misstatements, disagreements with management over accounting, reporting, or auditing matters that could be significant, findings or other issues. As I noted, we had one finding. We had in our report a matter of emphasis, and that was that the district adopted GASB 87 related to leases. The Governmental Accounting Standard Board issued new guidance as to how leases are treated in the financial statements that was considered significant this year. not from a, only because it's new and it changes the way the leases are reported on the balance sheet and in the required note disclosures. So again, aside from the inventory count, no other issues arose during the course of the engagement. And I certainly appreciate the help of Brad and his team there. All of the staff at the district were extremely helpful, and we were able to complete an audit for the first time at the district completely remotely. I don't, that's something that typically we come in and invade your office for a full week or at least a week during the year. And thanks to technology, we were able to perform our engagement 100% remotely. So I want to thank everybody at the district and the staff for allowing that to happen. It went as smooth as, well, smoother than I anticipated, put it that way. Not to say there weren't challenges in dealing with the back and forth, but certainly to perform an audit 100% remotely was quite a feat. So I want to thank everybody for that. With that, the reports have been issued, and I believe they're on the agenda for acceptance, but I'm happy to entertain any questions or comments from the board at this time.
Great, thank you, Mr. Nielsen. I want to thank everybody who worked on this. Again, I'll echo your comments. Doing this in the year of COVID has put a stress on all systems. Brad and the MTD financial staff, as well as you folks out there in Bakersfield, you guys have done a great job. But just again, it's almost seamless as where we are today and how we dealt with the physical inventory count. Obviously, very obvious as to why we did not conduct that. So anyway, with that, I'd open it up to questions and comments from other board members. A lot of takers right now. There you go. Director Sheeler, Bill.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to go through the report as it was provided in our packet sequentially, because I had a series of questions and comments. So if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and get started on that.
Please do, please do.
Okay,
And be as expeditious as you can. We do have a 10:30 meeting we're going to try to get to.
I recognize that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on page 7, it refers to what loss on disposal of assets. And that was a 309,000. I just wanted to know what that was in regards to. 309% change from the previous year. Was that when we got the money for the tank?
Mr. Davis?
Yes, that represents a couple of different things. It represents, first of all, the write-off of some assets or purchases that had originally been capitalized as assets and they're work in process. And it turns out that these projects were not going to be fully completed. They were just interim beginnings. And so some of those, they end up getting expensed. And more importantly, it's the disposition of assets, in this particular case, buses and service vehicles, et cetera, that are disposed of on a regular basis. And in particular, this year, we had a couple of buses that had some remaining depreciation. And so, to put it as succinctly as possible, if we sell the bus for less than the remaining depreciation, then that is considered a loss on disposal of assets. Now, there was a good reasoning for this, and we were, it was run by the FTA, and there's no issues there. But that's generally what it represents.
Okay, thank you. I know that's sort of in the weeds, but thank you. Whenever I see a large number like that, just wonder what that difference results from. On the next page, page 8, it talks about direct costs were down due to adjustments in service in response to the pandemic. So I guess that was to be expected. With a reduction of service, there should be some concomitant reduction in costs. And I'm just wondering, on the next page, page 9, it talks about the percentages associated with that route operations, vehicle maintenance, passenger accommodations, general overhead. I'm wondering if that gives us any insight as to planning going forward, if the district is forced to reduce service based on our budgeted deficits, is this kind of give us an idea of the scale of the kinds of reductions that can be anticipated by reductions in service going forward?
I'll take that one. Certainly, it gives you an idea if you look at it from a revenue hour perspective and try and do that calculation, but it's not exact. I mean, it depends on the type of service, the miles associated with a particular route frequency. It's complicated, and I think it gives you an idea. But as we move forward next year, I think we'll have a more detailed conversation about what's on the table. Not looking forward to it, but it's reality, and we're looking probably on March or April.
Thank you. On the next page, page 10, I think you may have discussed this before, but I think I'd like to hear it again. It talks about the allocation of STA funds normally reserved for capital projects. Is this something that's anticipated to be a one-time thing? Changes when the CARES money runs out? What do you anticipate us backfilling with in case this becomes business as usual going forward?
Well, in particular for the last fiscal year, we had originally anticipated, it's sort of in preparation for the likelihood of losing federal operating assistance after the results of the census a couple years down the road. And so what we had done is we had shifted some federal money that we received for our special stick fund over to capital funds, and then moved over some STA funds towards operating. Now, in fact, that was budgeted, but that did not take place. We did not use any STA funds in last fiscal year to fund operations. It is available for that if needed, but it is our mainstay of capital funding. So, it's something we would prefer not to do if we can avoid it. But it's we'll see what happens in the next couple of years. Obviously, with our overall revenue stream, as well as what happens, essentially with STA funds as well.
Thank you. The next question derives from page 11, where we're talking about OPEB, and it talks about the OPEB liability is funded at 59%. Could somebody please remind me of what was our goal and what the benchmarks in time were, such as like by when were we expected to get to an X percent?
I'll jump in first. I mean, ultimately on the OPEB, what the board set as goal was to obviously to fund it to an extent where we were hoping the interest would cover the annual operating cost. Brad, jump in, correct me if I'm wrong on that. And we felt like we got to that point at the current funded level. Also, it's an irrevocable trust. So at some point that benefit has been capped by the board through the CBA and the policy for non-represented employees. So at some point you want to draw down that principle. So it's a balancing act. Every 2 years we have to monitor it and see how we're performing. And I think that's what we had told the board and the finance committee we would do. And we're at a point now where I think we're comfortable with the current funding level, that we're on track. Brad, feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm off on that.
You're muted, Brad.
I just pushed that button. Anyway, I think one point to mention is that this last fiscal year and the one before that, we actually drew down funds from the trust in order to pay our ongoing retirement benefit costs, and that was due to budgetary pressures at that time. In the current fiscal year, we ceased that practice, and so really it leaves the balance intact for investment earnings to grow upon it. I mean, the good news is that investment earnings over the last couple of years did exceed actual outlays for retirement benefits, but we should see a continued improvement. Obviously, it's dependent upon the investment results that are done through CalPERS, and essentially they've been obviously much higher than, for instance, interest rates, as they do involve more risk-oriented assets while still maintaining appropriate safety standards.
Okay, then I'd like to follow up on that. Talking about, it talks about OPEB later on in the report, and my interest is in future payouts for retirement benefits. Am I right in understanding that eventually, as people retire or leave the district, new employees come in will not be receiving the same OPEB benefit? So eventually, this will be a dwindling necessity over time?
Yes, that's correct. That is its purpose. And as Mr. Estrada pointed out, it is a balancing act. We make assessments about future earnings, and we make assessments about the future need for the benefits. That's what we hire an actuarial who actually does that study for us. And you might recall that we initially funded the trust with $1 million. I think 3 years ago, and then with $500,000 in the following year. And presently our liability is around 3 million approximately, but it's not advisable to fund it to the entire 3 million because you have these anticipated growth from investments, and it is my mind's going blank, is an irrevocable trust that it would be very difficult to get the funds out if they were not needed for future OPEB payments.
Thank you for refreshing my memory on that.
Bill, I have a question. These are all good financial questions relative to our financial statement and where we're going. Do we have any questions regarding the audit itself and the information presented from the audited financials? We can come back actually and talk about our financial situation and put an item on the agenda for the details as we're going through here. But in the essence of time, the item before us today is whether the audit was completed accurately and whether we have any issues with the audited report itself.
Okay, I'll go to page. There's
Go
a
ahead.
page 12.
Go ahead and finish. Olivia, go ahead with your question.
Okay, the inventory, do we have a date when we think we will do that? And does the audit then change, or is there an amendment to it? Or is this something that they just pick up in a year or two whenever the audit gets redone?
Jerry?
Yeah, when we do the audit next year, we anticipate we'll be able to perform the full audit. I also believe Mr. Davis is planning for cycle counts or more frequent cycle counts throughout this year to offset it. But Brad, if you want to answer that.
Yes, I mean, essentially, the intent is to do one at the end of this fiscal year, assuming the conditions allow that. There's no changing what happened in the last fiscal year. We didn't do it, so that material weakness will stay there. The hope, of course, is to be able to do so this year. And given, I mean, it's our regular practice, but it's particularly important this year is to do these cycle counts, which are a much more limited basis. They don't have all of the big inventory counting firms. So we just have a couple staff members that go out and do it, and that gives us a good sampling. So it does carry out a portion of that necessary control.
I'll go back. Great, thank you. I'll go back to Director Sheeler. Bill?
Sorry.
No, that was a good question also. I guess it's on page 13 under management discussion analysis. It talks about LTF Measure A revenues. Then it talks about, however, at the end, it gets to saying, however, these findings do not explain the strong results in the first quarter of fiscal year 2021, which is being investigated. So maybe if there could just be, that was one of the things that stood out to me, which is being investigated. So somebody might be able to explain that a little bit more, please.
That is a part of the upcoming financial update for the quarter. So I would suggest that we wait until then. You get a thorough explanation on information we do know.
So that relates to that. Very good. And then the last question, I guess, that'll come through with at this time has to do with the summary of the auditor's results. And it does have a yes box checked under internal control over financial reporting, a material weakness identified. And then there was the narrative talking about the district implementing a policy and internal control activity to ensure where appropriate grant funds received in advance by the district are recorded as a liability and recognized as revenue when associated grant expenditures have been incurred. So is that different than what the district policy has been before? Is this something that wasn't pointed out by previous audits, but the district has been doing? Maybe an explanation of this would be helpful. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Director Schuler, what were you looking at, what you were just speaking of in the compliance reports?
It's on a checklist to the very end. It's page 12 towards the end of the report of the
Okay,
narrative of the report.
That's in,
It
yeah.
shows views of responsible officials and planned corrective actions.
So I apologize again, if you could repeat the question, what information you're seeking?
Brad, I'll take that if you don't mind. I'm on the page. This is Brian Nielsen with Brown Armstrong.
Thank you.
Director, in the first page you referred to in the summary of the auditor's reports, in the FY 2020, there was a material weakness identified related to the lack of inventory observation. Obviously, if you don't perform the inventory observation, the control did not work, right? What you're referring to in the separate section was related to FY 19. So if you scroll down to the item number 5 on that page 11, that is prior year findings and the status of the finding from the prior year. So in FY 19, we had a finding related to unexpended grant funds. And again, that repeats the finding in this year's report because we're providing comparative financial statements. The very last line item on the second page says current year status resolved, meaning they implemented the plan that they had developed after 2019 to correct that prior year finding. So we did not have the same finding in the current year related to grant funds. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I was just wondering, has this necessitated a change in the way the district is calculating this, or?
It did from FY 19 to FY 20. The condition that we noted was that the district's unexpended grant funds were recorded as restricted net assets as opposed to unearned revenues. So it's essentially a classification issue where they would, if you receive funds ahead of time, ahead of when they're actually used, then you don't recognize them as revenue. And the district was not doing that previously. They were recognizing the revenue in the year received, whether or not they had been expended. So we recommended after FY 19 that they change the classification and record those grant funds as unearned revenues until the time that they were spent. So it moved it from fund balance to a liability on the statement of financial position. They changed that in FY 20. We didn't have a same finding in the current year.
Right. I recall this coming up in the district agreeing to do this, and it looks like that it's happening. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bill, thank you for your thoroughness there, and on your financial statement questions. We can come back to that at a later date, but thank you for the detailed questions that you had there. Other questions for any of the staff and or Mr. Nielsen? Jerry, I have a question for you. This is listed on the agenda as an information only. We could do a motion to accept the receipt of the report.
Yeah, that'd be fine. It's just that there's no action. You're not going to change the finding.
No, it's just acceptance of receipt. Is there a motion to accept receipt of the report?
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion by Director Perotti. Do I have a second by Mr. McCory?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Director Perotti. Roll call.
Aye.
Director McCory?
Yes.
Dr. Weinberg is absent. Director Rodriguez,
Yes.
Director Sheeler.
I'm going to vote yes, but I just also want to say I appreciate this report. I think it gives a great insight into the workings of the district, and I really appreciated the narrative. It was very clear and understandable. So my vote is yes.
Vice Chair Tabor
Yes.
and Chair Davis echoes Mr. Sheeler's comments relative to the report. Thanks, Mr. Nielsen. And again, thanks all the staff members at MTD, Brad and your staff that basically put all this work together. So that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Nielsen, for the work and for being here today to explain it.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
If I might, Chair Davis.
Go ahead.
I'd like to, our next item is focused on the current fiscal year in the first quarter. What we haven't discussed, what I'd like to do so briefly, is the results of last fiscal year. We talked about the audit, but not about the results. So this won't take long, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to move
Well,
forward.
let me open the item, and you can report anything that you like. Okay. Okay, so I am now moving to item 8. That is the financial update. There we go. And first quarter review of fiscal year 2020 to 21. Staff's going to present the update to the board. This is also an information only item. So Mr. Davis, you're on. Brad, you're muted. Been a while, buddy.
Okay, the first slide here is in reference to the prior fiscal year, and it's a summary of the operating results for that year ended last June 30th. As we had initially projected in late April, the effects of the COVID virus would in fact reduce our fare revenue as we actually did shut down some service and begin and suspended fare collection. So we were expecting that, and it did occur, and we ended up with the reported $1.3 million deficit. Of course, that's relative to about $500,000, which was part of the revised budget. So this was nothing new in particular. I suppose, okay, next slide, Pablo, please. Just to talk, it's the revenue side that's of most relevance. And so it was a little bit surprising actually that sales tax revenue did come in a little bit stronger, and we'll get into that again more shortly, than was expected in the projected deficit. And we had more federal funds, in fact, as well as as I talked about earlier, we opted to bring back those capital federal monies back into operations and send and not utilize the STA funds. But just in general, overall, as you can see, our revenue was down 8% for the year, with, of course, the biggest drop in our fare revenue. As you can see in the green section, it was down 27%, which is seems approximately correct, given it was a little bit over a full quarter that we ceased the collection of fares, as well as fare contract programs such as UCSB, SBCC, Line 28, and the Downtown Waterfront Shuttle. So, we talked about this early last May, and things turned out as anticipated. So really there were no particular surprises, and I just wanted to kind of wrap up last year before moving on to this year. So next slide, please. Okay, what we'll be talking about, as I stated, is the fourth quarter with the first quarter of this fiscal year, with a particular emphasis upon the effects of the pandemic on the district finances, both just for the quarter and as anticipated for the rest of the fiscal year. Next slide, please. Similar to the chart we just saw for last fiscal year, this is the same one for the first quarter. Obviously, the matter that stands out, the item that stands out most is the green bars, which represent our operating revenue, which is significantly down from the prior year. In fact, it's down 35% from that time. This was anticipated, it's still difficult to see, but again, it's related to the lack of the collection of fares primarily. Also, our operating expenses are down as well, both from the budget and as well as the prior fiscal year. And the two main factors contributing to this situation, well, let me backstep just a second. You can see in the actual section that we ended up with a deficit for the first quarter of 1.7 million, which is obviously much larger than last fiscal year, but on the other hand, much better than was anticipated in the budget. And that has to do with a budget allocation, mainly how we allocate revenues and expenses to each given month. And in particular, it is the increase in sales tax revenue compared to what was projected, and as well as a decrease in operating expenses, mainly from providing fewer revenue hours than were budgeted. Next slide, please. And here I've isolated the operating revenues for the first quarter, which are the main item that is varying from the past. You can see in the prior year, the last bar that we've down at the bottom there, that represents the fare revenue. Of course, there is no such fare revenue either in the first quarter or as budgeted. So obviously those are missing. The blue section is essentially all other subsidies that we receive, including the sales tax revenue, the FTA income, as well as income from subscription services we provide, such as the Line 28 and the first last mile service and the downtown waterfront shuttle. I think the top portion is a relatively small part, but as of other income, but you can see that that's also down quite a bit, and it's a number. I mean, that's mainly composed of interest income, advertising income, and a source of income we no longer receive now since taking back control of Overpass Road is the lease income we previously received from ASTI or Marburg for the lease of the overpass facility. Let's see. Excuse me just a second. Okay, in this, the anticipation is to begin collecting fares again this January. We don't really have enough information at this point to know exactly when that's going to occur, but it's highly unlikely to start, for instance, on January 1st. But the idea being that we will start collecting fares sometime next in the second half of the fiscal year, which will add fare revenue, obviously, to the actual and budget charts. At that point in time, we also expect that the UCSB, SBCC, and first last mile services will be reinstated with the revenue provided by these programs, also adding to our overall operating revenue. Of course, this depends on a number of factors, whether students will be attending on-campus classes and decisions by the school system, and more importantly, what's going to occur with the pandemic. As I'm sure you're all aware, things have been looking worse recently. In fact, Santa Barbara was moved back into the red tier, the worst tier, effective today, which will result in a slowdown of business with most indoor services such as gyms and restaurants and hair salons no longer being capable. But on the flip side of that, we have some good news concerning potential vaccines for these. So Again, it's essentially too many variables at this point that are changing, and it's hard to say exactly when and which direction things will go. Next slide, please. Really, the main focus on the revenue side is sales tax revenue for this year. What I'm showing here first is actually the sales tax budget allocation by month. And as you'll note that there is generally an upward trend, and that's based upon the assumption that sales tax revenue would be down, particularly in the early months of the fiscal year as we recovered somewhat from the extreme dips in March and April. Next slide, please. And here in the green bars, we've added the actual sales tax revenue receipts. Also, when I talk about sales tax revenue, I'm talking both about the Transportation Development Act Local Transportation Fund, which is a statewide program, as well as the local Measure A, which provides MTD with both operating and capital sales tax revenue. But obviously, you can see here that the actual amounts are significantly higher than was projected. This was a big surprise. These projections were made at a time when the revenue was falling considerably, and the outlook was pretty bleak at that time. So this is a very good news. While not, just I suppose you would say, hypothetically speaking, if these revenues were to continue on track and say come in as they were last fiscal year, that would have the effect of increasing our operating revenue by about $2 million, which would reduce the projected deficit from $8.5 million down to $6.5 million, and which would result in requiring less CARES Act funding to balance the budget. Next slide, please. And what I put added here is the gray line, which represents actual receipts from last year. And of course, what's particularly noteworthy is how in the first 4 months, it very closely matches the sales tax receipts from last year. And another point is that in the last few months of the year, in the gray chart, you can see the drop at the end of last fiscal year as a result of the pandemic. And just next slide, please. And just to corroborate this information, this chart shows U.S. retail sales for the last 20 months for all of fiscal year 2019, or excuse me, calendar year 19 through this past August, the latest information available. And I just, quite frankly, I was very surprised with this chart and the quick return of sales tax revenue, essentially to the point so that by June, it was actually exceeding what it was prior to the pandemic. And these results have carried through according to the state for September, and from our own experience, our actual receipts through October. So it's hard to say whether this trend is going to continue, or if there's going to be, for instance, a downswing as a result of the worsening pandemic and the reactions to that. But this is a very good news, as sales tax revenue is our biggest source of operating revenue. Next slide, please. Okay, now I'm going to move on to operating expenses, and of course the biggest driver affecting operating expenses is the amount of service that we put out. And these charts, this chart and the table, are actually from the budget document for this year, presented last June. But the circumstances have not changed. It was anticipated with the continued suspension of services that we would be down in revenue hours this year by 11%, down to about 200,000 hours. And That was from continued the continued suspension of school boosters, as well as some tourism-related services like the downtown waterfront shuttle. It also includes the crosstown shuttle and a few other lines. Many of these are anticipated to begin again in the second half of the fiscal year. One noteworthy item is the downtown waterfront shuttle is scheduled basically to not operate this fiscal year. So there's no revenue hours or operating expenses associated with that built into the budget. So of course, the lower revenue hours has a significant effect upon our operating expenses. So you can move to the next slide, please. And here are our operating expenses. Personally, this chart is a little bit difficult to follow. I suppose one item you could draw from it is the significance of route operations expenses to the operation, as they make up over 60% of our costs. This chart's done slightly different, as opposed to showing across the actual budget and prior. I've broken it down by operating expense department, and then put the actual budget and prior next to each other. I think really it was anticipated for route operations and vehicle maintenance costs to be down quite a bit. They were down more than expected because the line 28 was budgeted to occur throughout the fiscal year. And in fact, given the continued distance learning at UCSB, as well as SBCC, the line 28 has still been suspended. So that has the effect of bringing down operating costs more than expected. This in particular, it affects our variable costs, which is our wages and our benefits, the cost of fuel, tires, et cetera, all those things that are directly related to the amount of service that we put out. So that explains really why our operating expenses for the first quarter are lower than projected. Another item to mention is the workers' comp expenses. I referred to that directly to drivers' workers' comp in the report in the board agenda. As a whole, workers' comp costs are down $340,000 from where we were at this time last year. It's which is really good news. But you might recall that last year we were seeing a big upswing in such costs in the first half of the fiscal year. And of course, a quarter does not make the year. And it's a good start, our results for this year, but these things have a habit of changing significantly throughout the course of the year. For the most part, that explains pretty much what I had to say about the budget. Just a couple of closing remarks. It is, of course, as I mentioned previously, the state of the pandemic, and is difficult to predict. So it makes it difficult to predict what's going to occur for the rest of this year, as well as next fiscal year and into the future. This is particularly the case with our operating revenue. And right now we have, we've got not so good news with respect to the state of the coronavirus, but then that's offset by the fact that there's 2 reports of vaccines that are looking very good and highly effective. And so hopefully we'll be seeing that going into circulation in the latter half of the fiscal year, which would be a game changer for MTD, as obviously much more importantly for the world as a whole. Regardless of the fact that we do have these budget deficits, again, it's scheduled at $8.5 million for this year. We do have CARES Act funding, the emergency funds allocated last March by the Federal Transit Administration based on congressional approval of that. That will definitely cover the shortfall for this year. and with room left over for next year as well. We anticipated it lasting for 2 years, and really it's hard to say what's going to happen next year, but it will expected we should have at a minimum of about $6 million left for next year. And then, of course, we always have our reserves. We have set aside close to $11 million in reserves to cover a variety of different purposes, and including capital projects, by the way. So that's a decent portion of that. But they are there for emergencies, and should the situation worsen, they could help balance the budget. And with that, I think that concludes my report.
Chair Davis, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Questions from the board?
I had one quick question.
Go ahead, Chuck.
When we start collecting fares again, how are we in terms of the CARES Act funding? Is that going to enable us to stay fairly close to what our budget needs are? Because right now, of course, we're operating without any fares, and hopefully the ridership will start building back up, and we'll start getting fares. But I'm wondering, what does that do to the remaining amounts of the CARES Act funding?
Well, at this point, our allocation from the FTA was about $16 million. Now, we ended up using $1.3 million during the fiscal year ended last June, and we're anticipated to use $8.5 million this fiscal year, which, it's looking like that will be less due to the outcome with our sales tax revenue being more than expected. We also will be providing some of these funds to our other local transit providers, including Easy Lift, and to SBCAG for the Clean Air Express. That's not anticipated to be a large amount, perhaps up to $500,000. So it will be leaving a little over $6 million for the following fiscal year 21-22. And again, it's very early to know whether that will be sufficient. I'd like to believe that it will be more than enough, but there is no sunset date on these CARES Act funding. What I haven't mentioned is the possibility of additional funding from the federal government. It's very up in the air at this point, so certainly not something we're relying upon, but that's also a possibility.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Director Sheeler, and then I'll go to Director Perotti. Bill?
Thank you, Chair. There was one statement that was made on the staff report on page 1 that was talking about the reinstatement of onboard fare collection, presumed to begin in less than 2 months, which is good news. Then it says again, the receipt of SBCC and UCSB is budgeted to start restart at the same time. It was my understanding that UCSB wasn't going to begin in-person classes probably until next fall. And so it seems unlikely that they're going to reinstate paying for the extra service that they've been receiving when there's the same situation that's occurring now. Ms. Blackaby went to a transportation Zoom yesterday. Maybe she's learned more about that, but I'm just wondering about the kinds of assumptions that are going into these budget projections. The report shows that the actual revenues significantly exceeded the budgeted revenues. Were other jurisdictions as surprised as we have been about the strong flow of sales tax?
I'd like to start by answering the first half of that question regarding the schools and on-campus instruction. I attended the UCSB meeting yesterday on behalf of MTD. There wasn't much discussion of that other than what I think is clear is that when this budget was put together back really at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was given their best guess about when things would start. And we were hopeful that at the first of the year, perhaps schools would be returning to on-campus learning, and that's what you see in the budget. That's not the case today, and we recognize that, Director Sheeler. So we'll be amending, have to amend our budget to reflect it. And we'll have to probably continue with essentially the suspension of some of the routes will be ongoing until we see on campus beginning again, learning happen again at UCSB and City College. So the budget you have was our best guess at that time, and it's going to have to be adjusted. The good news is, as you pointed out, and Mr. Davis has discussed, sales tax is better than we anticipated. And I think we were hearing that from other jurisdictions, at least the conversations I've had with our peers locally. But the big story for us is fares and when they'll bounce back. Even if we start collecting fares in January or February, whenever we feel it's safe to start doing so again at the appropriate time, we still have the maximum occupancy restriction on board the buses at 15. That's going to affect our ability to collect fare. We're not just going to bounce back and suddenly have the same ridership. It's going to take years. So the good news is, I think from Mr. Davis is what we could take away presentation is the fact that we are trending a little bit better than what we had thought we would be at this point financially. And that means that the CARES Act funding will hopefully last the 24 months that we had hoped for on the long, back in March, April, we were talking 18 to 24 months was our goal. And it looks like we're going to achieve that at this point if we stay the course. But early next year, we're going to have to take a really good look and see what's happening locally with UCSB and City College and make the appropriate adjustments.
Thank you. I think adjustments are really important. I understand it's a very fluid situation. It's very hard to have made projections a while ago and seeing what they actually turn out to be in reality. The audit stated that the projected deficit is $8.5 million. And it's nice to hear that the CARES Act will be able to, the way that it looks like it's going to be appropriated, will be able to help us for the next 2 years. But my concern is, and maybe this isn't the forum to actually discuss it, but my concern is that it looks like this is a deficit that at least a large portion of it could continue into the future. And that I know we kind of do budgeting on a year-by-year basis, but when the CARES Act finally does run out, I think we need to be strategizing for that like immediately.
Yeah.
I guess that's, and then just the last thing I'd like to say, that was just a comment. And then the last thing I would like to say has to do with the expenditure side. Reductions in services did yield 11%. And was that with the same number of employees and drivers? So we had a 11% reduction. And is that mostly due to people not accruing overtime?
I'd say that's a big chunk of it for sure. I mean, it's been a moving target with the employees. We've lost a few. We've been hiring as well. We have been able to bring down overtime, but we've also reduced the scheduled number of revenue hours significantly by suspending the services that we've discussed. And as far as future planning on the financial, I feel I need to respond to that. As I mentioned on the CARES Act funding, what we're saying is we think we have close to 18 to 24 months. And as I said a few times, I think we're going to be in the planning phase in April, March of 2021, which is the right time. That's a year in advance to start letting people know what things look like and what our finances are and what services are going to be really, we're going to take a good look at and see what things look like long term. So I think we're acting prudently and I think we're planning accordingly for the future, and we're trying to communicate with the public as management the best we can in the middle of a pandemic, and the situation is fluid. So I think we're on track to come forward early next year and start to have those discussions as part of the budgeting process for next fiscal year.
Thank you for those answers, and thank you, Chair. I'm done.
Great. Director Perotti, Paula.
Thank you, Chair Davis. First of all, Brad Davis, thank you so much for the report. I have to say that a lot of my questions and comments, Director Sheeler has already asked, but I would echo what he has to say about, even the city of Goleta is quite surprised at sales tax. It's not at all what we had expected. And so we're kind of taken aback by that. And my concern is always moving forward, will that continue? and I think that we're on the right road of being conservative here. And like you said, it is a fluid situation. There's so many uncertainties, and I just want to commend this board and staff for, it has to be a juggling act to really figure this all out, and I appreciate it. And I think we just continue down the road of taking a look at everything and seeing what happens. But there's so much uncertainty that we're just going to have to take a look at it periodically and see where we're at. So basically, my questions were answered, and just more of a comment. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Other questions, comments? Olivia, Director Rodriguez?
I have, it's kind of a weird question. The sales tax, does that include like property taxes too? Or is it, where does that money come from? Everybody's surprised on the sales tax revenue. And, there's just a huge boom here in Santa Barbara with housing, sales of homes. And is that why, does anybody know why that's happening? And even though it wasn't, anticipated?
If I may take that one.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yes, well, first of all, with respect to the property tax, no, that's independent of the sales tax revenue. It is strictly based on sales tax collected from retail sales. Property tax is, as you mentioned, is stable. We did not anticipate a big drop for this coming fiscal year, and although it's too early to say, as we really haven't received any property tax revenue just yet. But with respect to the sales tax revenue levels, I looked into this, and I ended up speaking to the lead sales tax economist at the state's legislative analyst office, and to ask him that very question. And quite frankly, he did not have a good answer. As he said, he understands. They report the what, not the why. But his suspicion was just, and I think others have come to the same conclusion, is there's a lot of areas that have actually picked up in sales tax revenue. There's a lot more grocery stores and food sales making up for losses in restaurant sales. On the, people are doing more home improvement projects, and so sales tax revenue from materials for that has improved. And so it differs across the board on the different types of sales tax collected. My understanding was that there was a little jump in automobile sales in the early summer as well. So there is, to the best of my knowledge, no pat answer as to why it jumped right back up to where it was. But
Brad, just a comment. I think the 30,000 foot level was after the initial shock last spring, right? There was a bounce back there was pent up demand, which basically showed itself in June, July, and August. That's generally accepted, that things opened up. Think about it. Summertime opened up, and there was pent up demand from the springtime shutdown that we're seeing that play out.
Okay. But is that part of the first quarter?
Yeah, and again, the interesting thing is going to be as we go back into purple, whether that then shows up in the next quarter and see what happens.
Right. Okay, thank you, Chair Davis.
Other questions? Director Tabor, Vice Chair Tabor.
Thank you. Just wanted to check real quick on the revenue details. We showed a significant drop in interest on investments. Is that due from us having to draw down those investments for operations?
No, that is not. It actually stems from basically from a reduction in interest rates. And as you may have heard, back when the economy was hard hit last spring, that the Federal Reserve took action to lower interest rates, and they did so tremendously. A year ago, we were earning about close to 2.5% in our main, where we keep the majority of our funds in the local agency investment fund, which is a state instrument. And that was what was paying 2.5% is now paying about 0.6%. We had projected it to come down, but certainly not to that extent.
Other questions? Okay, I'm actually going to move on. Thank Brad for the report and move on. We're actually getting a little bit behind in our agenda this morning. Brad, thank you so much for the report. It will be interesting to see what happens moving forward from here. And thanks again.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. That takes us to the next item, which is an action item. This is the Fleet Renewal Campaign RFP Contract Award Recommendations. Given our timing here, trying to get out of it by 10:30, I'm going to allocate about 20 minutes to this report.
Okay, Chair Davis, I'll go first, just a quick overview of what we're dealing with here, and then hand it off to our capital projects manager, Mr. Grip. But just the big overview here is, as the board might remember, in the budget, the board had authorized approximately $4.8 million for fleet renewal. And that's about 85 buses of our 113 bus fleet was diesel electric. What we did there was we were looking to make necessary improvements and midlife attention to the fleet that's needed. And that's what fleet renewal is about. In the meantime, what MTD has also done as it pertains to the zero emission goals, I want to be clear that that's somewhat separate. What we've done there in the past year is we've introduced 10 light duty vehicles, Chevy Bolts of the fleet, infrastructure to support it, infrastructure to support the micro transit vans. Once they arrive, we're able to place that order. We've also increased the number of heavy duty charge ports on this facility from 14 to 20, or from 15 actually to 29 with the SoCal Edison grant, charge ready grant that we have and that we're going to work forward towards. So that's a big step forward as well. So those are all steps towards the zero emission mandate 2040 with the state and the very ambitious goal of 2030. During the past year, we also completed a facilities master plan that gave us really an idea of what we're dealing with here at this facility, as well as overpass, and the amount of money and effort it's going to take to try to achieve those goals, and of course the mandate as well. That facilities master plan also resulted in which we presented to the board last meeting, the power modeling report, which I thought was very positive. And it shows that we're probably, unlike a lot of our peers in the state, we're in good position as it pertains to the service that we provide. So we've been making a lot of progress towards the zero emission goal and the mandate by the state. At the same time, we have a fleet of diesel buses that are really the bridge to get to that goal and to get to that mandate. And we have a responsibility to maintain them in a safe, in a state of good repair. And that's what fleet renewal is about. And I know the board understood that. That's why you approved the project originally. The recommendation today is to add another $2 million to that for group 3, which Mr. Grip will lay out in his presentation, the difference between the groups. And a reminder that we have aggressively been seeking discretionary funds for zero emission buses. We have been unsuccessful. That's why we're adding the $2 million for group 3 as an option in case we don't get funding. Because we're going to continue to aggressively seek funding for zero emission buses every year, every funding source that we reasonably can. So with that, I'm going to move on to Mr. Grip to provide you the details of the fleet renewal project.
Great, thank you, Mr. Estrada. That's a really good overview. Good morning, Ryan. How are you?
Good morning, Chair Davis. Thank you very much. Would you please queue up the slideshow presentation? Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So as General Manager Estrada mentioned in his introduction, really the purpose of this is to maintain the safety, reliability, and service availability, as well as driver and passenger comfort of our existing transit fleet. These are assets that we are reinvesting in because, as General Manager Estrada mentioned, this is the bridge fleet. This is what enables us to get to a zero emission fleet, is our existing diesel buses. And we can do so by reinvesting in these existing buses without sacrificing service to our passengers. And that's kind of a key takeaway. Next slide, please. So the fleet profile, what buses are involved in the fleet renewal campaign? We have 12 sub-fleets, which makes up about 85 buses, and that's up to, it's not guaranteed that we will be pursuing work on all 85. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. These are our diesel and hybrid buses only, and they range in size. It's basically the composition of our fleet from our 29-footers all the way up to our 60-foot articulated buses. You know, the defined useful life that FTA provides for 35 to 40 foot and 60-foot articulated buses is 12 years. For 35-foot medium duty buses is 7 years. So the average age of these 85 buses is 10 years. So as you can see, that's approaching the defined useful life. Well, what does that mean? That's simply a benchmark, but it's a comment to our fleet as a whole that it is trending a little bit older. So it's important for us to reinvest in this fleet so that we can keep going with the existing fleet that we have. The average mileage of the 85 buses, about 366,000. And again, the defined useful life for 35, 40, and 60-foot buses, about 500,000. And then for 30-foot medium duty, 200,000. So once again, that gives you a gauge of the age of our fleet against FTA's defined useful life. Next slide, please. So general description of the project. General Manager Estrada was mentioning, it's divided into 3 groups. So those 85 buses are in 3 different buckets, from Group 1 to Group 3. Group 1, 7 buses. Generally speaking, the type of work that's involved with Group 1, that's the major mechanical, functional, and cosmetic upgrades. So this would be your typical midlife overhaul. And as we mentioned, these buses, the particular buses selected for Group 1 are close to their useful life. They are compatible with the latest Cummins engines. So they're kind of in the sweet spot. That's why we chose this particular subfleet for Group 1, which will receive the greatest number and quantity of upgrades. Group 2 buses, 27 buses in total in Group 2. Now these are modest functional and cosmetic upgrades. Paint and decals, mirrors, those types of things. Now, the buses and subfleets that are within Group 2, these are generally the buses that have a reasonable amount of life left. So these would be considered kind of our newest buses, excluding the 10 most recent Gillig buses that we purchased in 2019. Now, the Group 3 buses, 51 buses, far and away the largest grouping of buses. And these, again, what we're targeting here, modest functional and cosmetic upgrades in Group 3. And these subfleets are at or near their useful life and slated for near-term replacement. So these 51 buses are really the buses that are the most in flux in our fleet in terms of if we do receive grant monies that General Manager Estrada was mentioning in terms of replacement monies for new buses, these would be the subfleets that we would be targeting. Next slide, please. So here's a summary of the subfleets by group. So as I mentioned, in Group 1, we have the 7 buses. Group 2, we have 5 subfleets, and then Group 3, by far and away the majority. As I mentioned before, in Group 2, they tend to be the newer buses. The one outlier would be that those 29-foot Gilligs, they're 2009s. The reason that they're in Group 2 is because they serve a particular purpose because of their size. They're smaller buses, more nimble buses, and so they're allocated to specific routes. And so there is a need to invest in these particular buses. And then, as I mentioned, in Group 3, certainly much higher mileage with the exception of the Gillig hybrids, the 40 foots. And those are in Group 3 because, and they would be a lower priority in Group 3 in terms of replacement, But there have been some mechanical challenges with those buses, so that's why they've been pushed into Group 3. Next slide, please. So groups 1 and 2, in the scope of work that was provided through the RFP, there's base and optional tasks in each of groups 1 and 2. And the base work simply is work MTD intends to have completed. And the optional work is elective work. And in group 3, all of the work in the scope of work that's presented is all optional. And that work can be selected at MTD's sole discretion throughout the contract term. And the reason that the scope of work was structured this way is to provide us with ultimate flexibility. So I think it's important what Mr. Davis was talking about in his financial report, which is that there are a tremendous number of unknowns. And even General Manager Estrada was talking about how that may impact routing. Well, those same unknowns may impact the fleet. So we wanted Group 3 to be 100% flexible, so we could opt into buses and work or choose not to pursue those buses and work associated with Group 3. Next slide, please. So here's a summary of work by group. So in Group 1, as I talked about, this is a traditional kind of a midlife overhaul. It's very maintenance intensive. Group 3 buses will receive new engines, rebuilt transmissions, paint and decals, body work, passenger windows. You can see from the list it's quite extensive. Now, the optional work that's represented for Group 1 is work that we are recommending to the board. So work like interior floors, trim, and panels to be replaced and redone, air tanks to be replaced, air systems to be replaced, and an HVAC front console. So what is this? This is an HVAC unit that would be dedicated to the bus operator. Now, why would we opt for a bus operator only AC unit? Frankly, it's due to cost. The HVAC unit for the bus operator is far more cost effective than going in and replacing or installing, I should say, an HVAC unit for the entire bus. So given budget limitations, we thought this was the best benefit in terms of providing cooling for our bus operators. It would go into the rest of the cabin, but it wouldn't be quite as effective as a whole bus unit. Group 2, as I mentioned, mostly cosmetic improvements, the base work listed there, with also the optional work of that HVAC unit for the front console for the bus operator, as I mentioned. And then Group 3, all in the optional category, but this particular optional work that we are recommending, paint body decals, passenger windows, and driver window. So that gives kind of an overview of the type of work that will take place in each group. And once again, Group 3, 100% optional. So we may or may not opt for any of the work that's listed there. Next slide, please. So this is just to give you a flavor of the body repairs, paint, decals that I was referring to previously. As you probably noticed, for each one of the groups, that's something that we intend to pursue. So this is a layout provided by Ms. Blackerby and her marketing team for our 29-foot hybrid buses. Next slide, please. For our 40-foot buses. Next slide, please. Our 40-foot hybrid buses. Next slide, please. And then finally, our 60-foot articulated buses. Obviously, with branding continuity, that's very important. So as a part of this project, we will be pursuing the new paint and decals on all of the buses that do get addressed in the fleet renewal campaign. Next slide, please. So the project schedule, the contractor, as part of their submittal, has indicated they need about 45 days to tool up their production line and to procure the necessary parts for the work that we are asking for. Work on groups 1 and 2, they will take place concurrently, and they will start simultaneously and take place concurrently. Our estimated timeline for Group 1 work is about 9 months. Group 2 work is about 10.5 months. And then work on Group 3, if initiated, will take place as soon as the Group 1 and 2 work is complete and the end of the contract term. So that gives us just over 2 years to make determinations of what specific buses and what type of work will go into Group 3. Next slide, please. So breakdown of the project budget and funding. The original budget for this project was $4,845,000. The project total now, what's being proposed to the board is $6,963,729. So the breakdown of that is the 7 new Cummins engines that will go into Group 1 buses. And then the fleet renewal campaign contract. So this is the value of the contract that we're proposing to the board. So what does that include? Includes Groups 1 and 2, the base work. So that's our minimum commitment, is the base work on Groups 1 and 2. And it includes the suggested optional work, what we think should be pursued for Groups 1 and 2. It also includes proposed work for Group 3. So going back to the slide that we had before that showed the optional work for Group 3, for all of those buses within Group 3, that would be the total. And then we put in a 10% contingency, the purpose of which is really any kind of unforeseen work. So as the contractor receives a bus, they're going to do a detailed inspection. If there's anything that needs to be addressed, safety items or just recommended repairs, that would come out of the 10% contingency. So adding all those elements up gets to the contract value of $6,474,683. So we're talking about a budget difference here of $2,118,729. Now, why do we have this differential between what we budgeted and what we're proposing? Really, it's attributable to the unsuccessful grant funding that General Manager Estrada alluded to. So we did go out for for funding for replacement buses. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful. So the buses that we were planning on replacing go into Group 3. And the monies that would cover the local match goes in to cover this deficit as a result of those buses instead of being replaced, shifting into Group 3. Next slide, please. So we conducted an RFP process to determine the most qualified proposer with a fair and reasonable price. The RFP resulted in only a single proposal by Complete Coach Works, and they were determined to be responsive and responsible. So we still go through our due diligence process to make sure that they have the financial and technical capacity to undertake the work, calling all of their references. The proposal that they provided scored very highly from our evaluation committee, who was composed of our fleet and facilities manager, Nolan Robertson, and one of our fleet maintenance supervisors, Rob Lurie. CCW was then invited to an interview. They performed extremely well in that interview. I think the evaluation committee was impressed by the resources that they have and the experience they have with this type of work. And then finally, we did a price analysis and made a determination that the pricing that CCW was providing with their best and final offer was fair and reasonable. Next slide, please. So I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you very much, Ryan. That was a very thorough report, and I'm sure there will be lots of questions from the board. So let me open that up to board members right now. Questions? Vice Chair Tabor, and I'll go to Director Perotti.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. I agree with our chair's evaluation of your presentation. Only thing I wanted to know was when we start shipping these off to CC&W, how many buses will be going at a time?
That's a great question. So if we do award a contract to CCW, we will be discussing the schedule in more detail. What it looks like now with Groups 1 and 2 taking place simultaneously is that would be no more than 2 buses from Groups 1 and 2 once they get into production. So initially, it'll just be one bus from group one bus from group two. Those will be the pilot buses and will enable us to evaluate their work. As soon as we sign off on their work, then we'll probably send 2 at a time from each group.
Director Perotti, Paula?
Sorry, Chair. I was just curious on looking at the report again. What the RFP? Did we only have one applicant, the CCW, that applied, and why was that?
You're exactly right, Director Perotti. Thank you for asking. Unfortunately, we did, and a lot of it has to do with the unique nature of this type of work. Individually, things like paint and body work, plenty of organizations that do that, or seating repairs, plenty of organizations that do that. Replacing the engines on our existing buses, plenty of organizations that do that. But when you combine all of the tasks, there are very few organizations that provide the full suite of work we were looking for. So we really had a decision to make, which was combine everything and go through a single source, or divide it up and go through multiple sources. And we decided that it was in the best interest of the district from a pricing perspective, but also from a warranty perspective. You know, we get into these situations that if we use multiple vendors, if there's problems with the work, then we have to go to each one of those individual vendors to deal with any kind of warranty issue. Whereas this is kind of the one-stop shop mentality, as well as the economies of scale. We thought combining all of this work into one for one particular contractor would behoove us from a price perspective. And we found that it did. We compared, CCW had to provide line item pricing for every single task that we had listed in the scope of work. And so we broke those out into chunks to look at specific segments like engine replacements, like paint and body work. And we were able to compare that with pricing that we've received before and made a determination that the pricing is fair and reasonable. And so the few that actually do this, one of them is based out of New York and said logistically it would be too challenging to deal with, and the other one was too busy to undertake the work. So we were left, unfortunately, with CCW as the sole proposer for this particular RFP.
Thank you very much for that. It helps me understand. That's a great explanation. It makes total sense. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the question. That was going to be a question that I had also. Other questions from board members?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Corey, Director McCory. Chuck?
I just want to make sure I understand that this includes all three groups, which would include, I guess, the one I'm questioning is the group 3 would be included in the package?
Great question, Director McQuarrie. It would as proposed. So the budget amendment that we had discussed in the board report, that does include group 3 and the options that we had listed in that chart, which included paint and decals, seating, modest flooring repairs. So basic cosmetic work for group 3 is included in that total overall budget. However, we may or may not pursue it. So I think what's important, an important takeaway for the board is that overall amount that we're asking for, that's kind of a ceiling. That's a not to exceed, because we still don't yet know what we're going to be doing with group 3. And we structured it in that way to give us ultimate flexibility. So groups 1 and 2, we have base level work, and that's for the contractor too. Nobody's going to want to bid on a project if everything is optional, right? So we had the base level work in groups 1 and 2 and the optional work that we're recommending for groups 1 and 2. And then we have this grab bag of group 3, which is included in this budget revision that we're talking about. But the reality is after groups 1 and 2 are complete, and in that time frame until the end of the contract term, this is a 3-year contract term, you know, we may be pursuing only half of the buses in group 3. We're very hopeful that we'll receive monies for replacement buses in the near term, and that will knock out some of the buses that are listed in group 3 currently. So it represents a worst case scenario if we're not able to receive any of the grant funding for replacement vehicles.
Okay, I guess, am I still on?
Yes.
Now, what does this do in terms of our state of good repair?
It's an interesting question. So as far as the buses that it really affects the useful life are group 1 buses, the 7 that are in group 1, because that's the target of the major mechanical work, the new engines, the rebuilt transmissions. That's going to breathe at least 6 years of new life into those buses. For the remainder of the buses that are subject to this project, not so much, other than it improves the quality of the bus. It's going to improve the quality for the passengers because we're addressing seating and windows. It's going to improve the quality for the drivers, at least in the group 2 buses, because we're adding on that driver-specific AC unit. So in terms of useful life, really just group 1, and 2 and 3 are improvements to the vehicles overall, but not necessarily extending useful life of those vehicles.
Well, just one final question is, what does this do from a marketing standpoint and getting all the old yellow buses off the, off the street? I guess what I would like to see us do is minimize the number of old yellow buses that are out there in service. I'm not sure, what that does toward that.
It will complete that project, Director Inquiry, if we pick up the option on 3.
I'm sorry, Gary.
It will complete that process if we pick up the option on group 3.
Okay.
It was very clear that all the buses except for Group 3 obviously would be changed out. And then it's optional as to how many in Group 3 we ultimately get to before they actually are taken out of service and swapped out for electric buses in the future. Is that correct, Jerry?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Okay. Ryan, I'm going to stay on right there. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item?
There are no public comments.
Great. Thank you very much.
Chair
Takes us-
Davis,
Yes.
one quick question.
Go ahead, Olivia. Sorry about that.
Okay. That's okay. I had it for a while and, I know this is a 3-year contract that we're looking at. If, assuming the pandemic gets resolved and things get sort of back on track, whatever, are they willing to, if this doesn't get resolved, in 3 years and we can't go through this contract, is there an amendment? Do we have some kind of option where we can go back and extend it? Do the prices go up after that, after the 3 years, based on the circumstances that we're facing right now? I mean, it's not a normal year, 2 years, who knows how long it'll take for everything to turn around.
Yeah, that's a great question, Director Rodriguez. That's why we went with a 3-year term. So that's longer than we probably would have. And to answer your question, if it extends beyond that 3-year term, so we've addressed groups 1 and 2 and a portion of groups 3, but there's still some uncertainty as it pertains to the pandemic and MTD's routing, then we would likely go out to bid again after that 3-year contract term to ensure that we're receiving competitive pricing. The nice thing about having gone through this process is we could remake the process fairly easily and be fairly nimble to go out to bid again. But that's why we kind of elongated the contract to the 3-year term, whereas we probably would have stuck with maybe just a 2-year term to get all of the work done. But we built in some flexibility.
Okay, and one other question, just to follow up on that. And this kind of works in, I think, real estate. And so I don't know if it translates over to this, but have they asked about like a right of first refusal, or like, can you come to us first so that we don't have to jump through all these millions of hoops and see if they can give us a better or the best deal? Is that even legally allowed, or do we have to go out to bid? That might be a little too in depth, but I'm just wondering, when there's a term like this and we're in such turmoil, it makes me a little nervous.
What I'll take that question. I think what we would do is, once we get group 1 and 2 started, if we feel that there's a potential that we're going to breach the 3-year period, we'll come back to the board and give you an update on what our options are as far as trying to extend the agreement. But I don't think I want to wing an answer on that without having a thorough procurement analysis of what our options.
Okay. Yeah, I know. It's kind of out there. I was just wondering, it's sometimes easier if they're still out, the only ones out there in the market in 3 years, so that we don't have to go through all of this and, maybe the price can stay stable but 3 years is a long time right now. So thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you for your answers.
Okay, we have a recommendation that the board authorize the general manager to enter a contract with Complete Coach Works for a bus refurbishment campaign. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
A motion by Director Perotti. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Director by Director Tabor is the second. I will do a roll call, starting again at the top. Director Perotti,
Aye.
Director McQuarrie, he said yes. Let the record show that he said yes. He was muted at the time. Director Weinberg is absent. Director Rodriguez,
Yes.
Director Sheeler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor,
Yes.
and Chair Davis votes yes. So that motion passes 6-0 with 1 absence. Thank you very much. Brian, thank you for that report, and we'll move right into, just for one moment, Jerry. I think our 10:30 is going to be late. If you need to notify anybody relative to that, you might do that, because we're going to be at least 15 or 20 minutes late.
I think I scheduled it for 10:45, so.
There you go. Good. Okay.
One final
Mr. Chair.
comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one final comment on that is I wanted to be clear. It's unfortunate that we only received 1 proposal, but CCW has a very good reputation in our industry, and we look forward to working with them. We're pleased with the response, and we think they're going to do a great job for us.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I
Yes,
will,
ma'am.
I will have to be leaving at 10:30. I have a doctor's appointment. So at 10:30, 10:35, I will be.
Thank you. Thank you for that note. Thank you for that notice. That takes us, I believe, now to item 10. This is a recommendation to award a sole source contract to Cummins Pacific. The recommendation is authorize general manager to award a contract to Cummins Pacific for the procurement of 7 Cummins EPA 2017 L9 diesel engines. Jerry?
Yeah, I could hand this out to Mr. Grip, but I think for brevity, you just really received an update on what the purpose of these engines is for,
Right.
for Group 1. If you have any questions for me or Mr. Grip, would be happy to answer them.
Any questions on this item? Madam Clerk, is there anyone who wishes to speak from the public?
There are no public comments at this time.
Good, thank you very much. That then takes us to the action. I read the recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Director Rodriguez. Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll be glad to second that.
Okay, Bill, I think he beat you to it, Bill. Second by Vice Chair Tabor. I will roll call vote again. Director Perotti,
Aye.
Director McQuarrie. He said yes again. He is still muted. You're going to get this one yet, Chuck. He said he voted yes by hand. Director Weinberg is absent. Director Rodriguez,
Yes.
Director Sheeler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor,
Yes.
and Chair Davis votes yes. Again, this motion passes 6-0 with 1 absence. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Ryan, for the report, and Jerry for the presentation.
Chair Davis, if I may, real quick, I just wanted to thank also the maintenance team and Valerie White, who were a big part of these projects. They did a tremendous job.
Good, thanks for getting that in there, because again, we know there's all your team basically working on this to give them some recognition in front of the board. Thank you for that.
Thank you all.
Okay, takes us into item 11. This is an award agreement for a workers' compensation third-party administrator. I'm going to jump right into Ms. Gregg.
Go ahead.
All right, well, terrific. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to briefly give a few key points on the value of third-party administrator services before handing it off to Ms. White to discuss the results of the RFP. I'd like to echo what Mr. Grip just stated. She's been an invaluable resource for the HR and risk department in this RFP process, and I'm really looking forward to her presentation today to the board. I'd also like to welcome Adrian Garcia. He is the Director of Sales and Client Solutions from TriStar Insurance Group, the top ranking firm being presented today. And also participating from my team is Rafael Cortez, MTD's risk administrator.
Good. Welcome to you all.
Terrific. Yes, we are excited to be here. So just want to, again, just briefly give the board a little bit of background on the use of third-party administrators. These are companies that self-insured employers contract with to administer the workers' compensation claims administration process, and really to provide operational services and support to the employer. The process of properly and effectively administering claims is very complex, and that complexity is ever growing, as we all are aware. And there are numerous mandated compliance deadlines where actions must be taken by. The reserving process is governed by a whole body of law and has a lot of moving parts to it. Effectively providing benefits and facilitating the injured worker to return to work has a direct effect on controlling the costs associated with the workers' compensation program. And while a self-insured employer does have the choice to handle these claims administration process in-house, working with a third-party administrator really ensures adherence to compliance and regulations. Definitely important for a public agency. And it also conserves available staff resources to be directed towards other areas in the workers' compensation program. Now, that's not to say that we are removed from the process, far from it. MTD is in our DNA to be involved with claims management and work with our TPA as a strategic partner. And with that, MTD is really looking for a third-party administrator to grow with us, kind of understand MTD's vision for the future, provide a partnership to leverage their expertise and resources to support our workers' compensation program and continue to develop cost containment strategies. So again, we're thrilled to be here today. It's been a very in-depth process. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Ms. White for her presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Gregg, and thank you, board, for your time. As it was explained, the risk department developed this comprehensive scope of services that ensured the prompt, fair, and equitable workers' comp claims evaluation, administration, and settlements. The request for proposal was issued in September. Following that submission period, MTD received and reviewed 7 proposals. The evaluation committee included MTD's Mary Gregg, Director of Human Resources and Risk, Rafael Cortez, our risk administrator, and Steve Moss, our grants and compliance manager. In reviewing the proposal, they scored each of the firm on 4 principal criteria: their firm expertise, especially with California Transit, staffing plan and their experienced personnel, and the work plan, which was their approach to the scope of services, and the price proposal. If you're following along in the board packet, it's on page 102, where the total scores and rankings are presented. Of the top 3 scoring firms, staff conducted reference checks, which were all favorable. So the evaluation committee then interviewed Intercare, American Claims Management, and TriStar Risk Management. And the committee was also provided demonstrations of each of their technology interfacing called the RMIS. This resulted in TriStar services best meeting the needs of MTD. Really, TriStar's technical proposal had received the highest score, but after the interviews, that decision was solidified. Their complete proposal is in the board packet today, and on page of our board packet, page 175, I'm scrolling down. That is their total, proposed cost over the 3-year agreement for their benefit administration is shown there at $222,222. This averages $63,299 annually for the base term, which is the next 3 years and 6-month period. This is a slight savings from our incumbent schedule, a savings from the independent cost estimate that was performed, the ICE, and the average cost of all the offers that MTD received. So based on that analysis, TriStar's price was found to be fair and reasonable. The option for 2 one-year contract extensions may be exercised if mutually agreed to by MTD and TriStar. So the total of a 5-year, 6-month contract is going to be $359,475. There's no change or impact then to our current anticipated budget for the TPA. So the cost continues as is. Pending any questions, I really would be happy to answer them, but I would like to recommend the action item that the Board of Directors authorize General Manager to award and execute agreement with TriStar.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the report.
Try to whip that up.
Good job. Good job. So questions from the board? A lot of reading there, I gotta tell you. I had one question, which is not related to the selection. Our previous carrier, the Risk Workers' Comp Administrators LLC, did not propose. Is that correct?
That is correct. We did not. They were provided, of course, to participate. Were invited to participate in this and did not submit.
Good, thank you. Your staff report was very complete. Thank you very much, and provided information. I'm looking for questions. Director Sheeler, Bill.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question. When you went through your analysis of their proposal, were you able to receive any feedback from anybody regarding the quality of managed care services?
Yes. That actually is one of the kind of ancillary cost containment program outside the scope of services, but TriStar is definitely going to provide that solution, just as our incumbent had provided that solution for us as well. And that's the nurse triage, bill review, utilization review. And that gets charged back directly to each claim as it's needed. Does that answer your question?
I was also wondering, does the third-party administrator ever interact with employees that are affected and a part of this chain of working things out? Because it's real important to have quality people working with MTD employees, and you want people that are sensitive and compassionate and understanding. And
yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. That definitely is the key piece to this, is the customer service to MTD's injured employees. So thank you for bringing that to everyone's attention. Mary, Ms. Gregg, do you want to go ahead and speak to that additionally, what TriStar would presented to you as far as customer service? Oh, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
There I am. I can't see myself. I hid myself. Yeah, I would absolutely love to add to that. Over the course of the years that I've been here, we've really looked at the structure of our workers' compensation program, kind of evaluated what that first touch or first reach out to our employees is all about. We've made some enhancements and improvements over the year. And certainly, as Ms. White had indicated, it's a primary focus for myself and Ms. Cortez to have a third-party administrator on board that has very transparent and set process.
Someone needs to mute themselves, Chuck. Thank you.
And so it's very important to us that we are engaged from moment one with our employees. Studies have shown that the more involved both the employer and the third-party administrator is with the employee or the injured worker, the better chance of a return to work there is to bring that employee back in. And TriStar's customer service and what they have on board, we're very excited by. In addition to that, there are some technological aspects of their proposal, such as an employer app and an injured workers app. So they have instant information to what's going on with their claims. So all of these things are, I think, going to be very successful for our program and a top priority for us.
Thank you. That's great to hear.
Other questions? Vice Chair Tabor. Dave.
Thank you. Let me see if I understand correctly. I didn't see it in the report, but I believe Valerie mentioned that the cost of this contract would be less than or what we're currently paying. And we're getting more bells and whistles.
That is correct. Yes, they were right in line. It's about 2% less.
Good. Thank you.
I like her.
We like those kind of answers. Okay, other questions? Okay, not seeing any. Madam Clerk, do I have anyone from the public who wishes to speak?
There are no public comments at this time.
Great. Okay, coming back to the board, the recommendation will be to authorize general manager to award and execute an agreement with TriStar Risk Management for third-party administration services for MTD self-insured workers compensation program. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Tabor. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Director Rodriguez. Okay. Roll call vote. Director Perotti?
Aye.
Director McQuarrie? Where are you, Chuck? Yeah,
Yes.
there you go. Director Weinberg is absent. Director Rodriguez?
Yes.
Director Sheeler?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor?
Yes.
Chair Davis votes yes. Vote is 6-0 with 1 absent. So again, thank you, Ms. Gregg, Ms. White, Mr. Garcia, and Mr. Cortez. Thank you for the good report. Very complete, and we like the answers.
Very much so. Chair Davis, if you don't mind, again, I'd like to reiterate a big thank you to Ms. White. This was, as you can see by the lengthy report, a very in-depth process. It's a critical need for MTD, and having experienced this personally, it was extremely well done, and we're thrilled with the outcome, obviously. And then I know we're hard up on time, but I just wanted to give Mr. Garcia an opportunity to at least say hello to everybody. Wave hi.
Fantastic. Good morning, Mr. Garcia.
Good morning, and to you and everyone on the board. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. We look forward to our partnership with MTD and the successful years to follow.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on in the essence of time, we're now going to move on to item 12, the general manager's report. Mr. Estrada, good morning again.
Yeah, rather than really, I'm not going to discuss the general manager, but I'll answer any questions you may have regarding the report. But I do want to take this moment, since we're short on time, to thank the entire team. I haven't had the chance. Everybody else has been doing it. But our staff has worked incredibly hard. This board packet is one of the last ones of the year. It's been a long year. Valerie White's our new purchasing agent. She joined us right around March at the beginning of the pandemic, so the board hadn't had a chance to meet her. So I apologize you didn't get a better introduction. So I'm trying to do it now at this end. You've seen the quality of the work. She's been instrumental on a number of the items that have come before you, not only today, but in a few of the other board agendas previously. So with that, big thank to all of our team for getting all this work done. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have regarding the general manager's report.
Great. I second that. And again, it's a great introduction because you come in basically showing what you can do. And it was a very excellent report. So good introduction to the board. So welcome aboard. Questions to Jerry on his report? Director Sheeler, Bill.
Is there going to be a meeting in December?
Yes, we have a special meeting scheduled for, I believe it's Tuesday, December 8th. We've got some items we need to address before the end of the calendar year.
Good. Okay, we're going to move on then to item 13, communications. Jerry?
Yes, what you have before you, this is informational, is a letter notification from SBCAG that they're moving forward with our request for an amendment to the Measure A ordinance. I attended the first hearing of with the SBCAG board in October. I'll be doing so this week as well. I'm hopeful, optimistic they'll agree to the amendment, and I think we're on schedule for that. Really what we asked for was just some flexibility in the capital funds, that in an emergency, essentially we could use it for operating. And all of this was really, thought of pre-pandemic, when we were really focused on the decennial census impacts and the reduction in federal operating assistance that we anticipate as a result of that. So this is, so far the SBCAG staff has been supportive of the change, and I'm optimistic that we'll get approval this coming Thursday, but we'll have to wait and see.
Good, thank you very much. That takes us to item 14, other business and reports. Anything there on the agenda? Okay, it takes us to adjournment. Note that there's a special meeting, we said, as Jerry indicated, on December 8th. And I would basically wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. Good job, everybody. We made the timing. Yeah, Jerry, it was a very, very heavy agenda. Your staff did a great job. Again, kudos to everyone. Kudos to everyone. Christina, I think we're done.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.
Chair, how do you want to handle the Kyriel ad hoc meeting now?
It is a separate item. It's got its own link, and it's basically go